Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Education work session for April 7, 2014. Before we get started, I'd like to wish Dr. Shepard well. I understand he's under the weather, and we're pretty sure he does not have a degree from either Connecticut or Kentucky, so we think he is actually not feeling well. So, and I'd also like to welcome Deputy Mark Hunt. Thank you for being here for providing security. He's a DARE officer throughout the system, so we appreciate you being here. And to everyone else, welcome to the Ed Center. We're glad you're here. And with that, I'd like to call for a motion to set the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add an amendment to the agenda. I'd like to add an item for items for consideration at the April 14th business meeting. And the item would be a resolution in response to the request from the Cabarrus Teachers Association that we send recommendation to the state legislature on what we think should be done with the 25% contracts.
Okay. I have a motion to amend the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Monroe, that passes 7-0. We will add that as 4.11. David, if you'll key down for me, please. Okay. Now, with that, do I have a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
Move for approval.
I have a motion
Second.
by Mr. Shue and a second by Mr. Walter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda has been approved, and we'll move on to reports. And we'll ask Ms. Kelly Klutz to come to the podium for Section 3, our budget status report.
Good afternoon. This evening we'll start our budget status report with our budget awareness survey results. And after that, then we'll go into more detail about our budget, current budget status. So I want to share that with you, and I have the document pulled up. You should have it all. Okay. So in our budget committee, we decided that we would like to get input from various staff members and citizens and even students, and so we sent our budget awareness survey out, and this is the introduction to the budget survey that we received. We explained to the people that took our survey that it was important to us to be aligned with our vision, mission, objectives, and strategies for our budget to be aligned, and some of the things that were important to us in our budget was to increase teacher and staff pay, to address overdue facility repairs and maintenance, to increase the number of teaching positions, and to increase technology. And so through this survey, we were looking to determine awareness, and we were looking to determine level of support for those types of things. So the first thing that we asked was who was responding to our survey. We had 1,924 responses, and you can see that to the right were the types of who represented the responses. So 1,107 were employees, and you can tell by the numbers you could be an employee and you could also be a parent based on the numbers. So 1,107 employees responded, 638 were parents with an elementary school student, 483 were parents with a high school student, 468 were parents with a middle school student. Some of the things that were important to board members was that we were reaching out to community members with no children in our system. You can see there that we had 151 of those people respond, which was good for our system. We also had caregivers and grandparents respond to the survey, so I think we reached a lot of citizens that we were intending to reach with our survey. So out of our respondents, we asked the income level of the household, and you can see we reached all levels of income. It was fairly evenly distributed, with not as many in the low income, 0 to 25,000, and more evenly in the 25 to 100,000 in income. The next question we were talking about our budget covering our day-to-day expenses, including salaries and benefits and instructional supplies, and we were also talking about our capital budget and how that does not cover those types of things, but construction and new schools and those types of things. We want to know the awareness of our responders amongst those issues. You can see that 17% were not aware of the different funding sources. 47% were somewhat aware, and 34.5% were fully aware. So while we are happy that it seems to be the majority are aware of our funding sources where we can't spend operating dollars on capital and we can't spend operating on capital, there's still 17% out there that are not aware that we can't use those funds interchangeably. Okay. The next question was regarding our revenue and our annual operating budget and where those funding sources come from. 68% of our dollars come from state, 27% come from local, and 5% come from federal, and we were looking for the awareness there. You can see again that 13% were not aware, 55% were somewhat, and 30% were fully aware. Okay. The next question was about our awareness of the number of students that we're serving or have been serving since 2009. Our student enrollment has grown at least 10%. We've increased to over 30,000 since 2009, and so it appears that most of the citizens and people that took our survey are aware that we're growing. 10% were not aware. The next question was about since 2009, combined teacher health and retirement costs alone have increased $28 million. During the same time period, our funding for operating expenses has only increased $20 million. So our expenses rate were increased $8 million more than the revenue that we received to fund those. And so we were asking what awareness there was. And so 44% were somewhat aware, 28% fully aware, and 25% who took this survey were not aware that our expenses increased higher than our revenue base. Okay. The next question was we were determining awareness that close to $17 million or 85% of the increased funding that we had was used to hire more teachers to meet the state requirement on class size. So because of the growth, we had to use those dollars to hire teachers because there's minimum class sizes or maximum class sizes. And so the level of awareness around that issue, 50% somewhat aware, nearly 20% fully aware, and 29% were not aware. Okay. The next item was awareness around North Carolina being ranked 48th nationally in the average amount of per spending per pupil, and that's $8,433 is what North Carolina spends on average. The awareness around that issue, 52% fully aware, 25% somewhat aware, and 21% not aware of that issue. And then the next question goes to the level of awareness of what Cabarrus County Schools spends locally. On average, Cabarrus County spends $7,155, which is significantly less than what the state spends. That makes us 113th in the district out of 115 districts in North Carolina. And you see that the level of awareness is dramatically different here. 38% not aware at all, 32% is somewhat aware, and 28% fully aware. And we've been talking about this for a number of years, so it's hard to get that out and relayed, but we're trying. Okay. We had a couple of questions about technology, because we have a large technology expenditure or in our budget, and we're trying to plan and make sure that we're using the best plan for those dollars. So we needed to know, Cabarrus County Schools plans to continue its effort to build innovative and digital teacher and learning environments in every school, and to better help us inform our planning, please respond to the questions. We wanted to know, do you have internet access at your home? And so 97.8% of our respondents said yes, they have internet access at home. Does your child have a mobile device such as a smartphone, tablet, or laptop? You can see 72.7% said they do, 22.6% said they did not. Okay. The next question was, would you support your child bringing his or her mobile device to school for use during the classroom instruction? And 67% said yes, and 28% said no. And the next question is, are you willing to pay a $30 to $50 annual fee to use CCS-owned mobile device for your child's classroom or home use? 58.6% said yes, 37.4% said no. One of our board members wanted to know if this information changed by income level. So we gathered that information by income level, and we have that available. Will you switch over? It's technology. I'm going to show you over to the right.
Oh, the right one?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, let me get the right one. That one right there. Technology questions by income. So yeah, can you enlarge it just a little bit? So this one determines by income. The first question, the first question was, do you have internet access? And the when I enlarged it, I lost the. So if your income was greater than $100,000, your blue income, you see the grid there. If I make it smaller, sorry. Okay, can you see it now? Okay, so you see the trend and how you would expect it to go, except for with you have internet access at home. Even if you're lower income, there's still 97% of our survey participants said that they still have access at home. When you own a device, the higher income is 88%, and then the income that's less than $50,000, 66% own a device. So the trend is what you would expect. Okay, I'll go back to the other. Thank you. Okay. So the next question is regarding teacher pay. Please indicate the level of support for increased teacher pay. So we asked two questions. Indicate your level of support, and then what is an acceptable way to fund it. And so in this example, 86.5% said they strongly support increase in teacher pay. And then the funding options were, I do not support, redirect current non-school funding to public schools, increase taxes, issue bonds, or they just didn't answer. So you can see there clearly that 65.6% said redirect current non-school funding to public schools or increase taxes, and there's a little bit of even issue bonds, which we know that that's probably not a good way to do, but there's support there for increasing teacher pay. Even with local supplements, the average annual salary for teachers is about $46,000, which is $10,000 less than the national average. On average, it's $7,000 less than the salary of teachers in neighboring states such as Georgia, Virginia, South Carolina. In the past 5 years, Cabarrus County teachers and other staff have only received pay increases totaling 2.2% of the total. 1.2% came from the state and 1% came from local funding. During Governor Jim Hunt's administration, 1993 to 2001, North Carolina teacher salaries ranked 24th in the nation. Under the current administration, teacher salaries ranked 46th in the nation. So the question is, the state should keep salaries the same for teachers as they are. And 77.5% strongly disagree and 13.3% disagree. So you have a strong 90% that say that we need to do something about teacher salaries. And then the question about the funding, wait, no, that's not. So it says the state should increase teacher salaries to be more competitive with neighboring states and the national average, even if it means redirecting funds from other areas. And so we have strongly agree, and we have agree in high percentages there. Clearly lots of support for increasing teacher salary. Okay. According to a recent survey, 26% of the teachers who participated in the survey said they spent at least $400 of their own money for school supplies. And so we're indicating level of awareness for this item, and we're indicating that a lot of people are aware that teachers are spending their own money. And we know that they don't get paid any. They get paid very little, and then they're spending their own money to support their profession. Okay. Okay. So in an effort to to promote student achievement, we're dedicated to recruiting and retaining highly qualified and motivated teachers in a safe and comfortable learning environment. And so we want to determine the level of support for increasing teacher pay. Did we not just do this one? Are we going backwards? Okay. I'm going to go over, skip that one. I'm going to skip, okay. I didn't do, that's, okay. Okay, so this one is indicate our level of support of increasing the number of teaching positions, and then the acceptable funding method. So 64.
Is that just a roundabout way of asking if you want smaller classes? Or am I missing something there?
It is. It's smaller classes or different structures of classrooms. But yeah, it's more teachers in our classrooms.
Okay, maybe more teachers per student, sort of across the board. Is
Across
that kind
the
of what
board,
we were at?
it is. It is. So there's a 64.8% strong support and 24.2% moderate support, and then somewhat support. So there's a high level of support for more teachers in the classroom. And then they believe that the funding that should be available for that is redirect current non-school funding to public schools. 13.1% said they would increase taxes. 12% said they would issue bonds. Only 6.9% said they don't support the funding for this area. Okay. And now we're going into addressing overdue facility needs and repairs, and then what's the acceptable method for funding those areas. So if you look at the chart, it says that 49.4% of people strongly support, 34% moderately support, and 14% somewhat support. So their support is just kind of staggered there. Then if you look at the areas that they believe should be funding it, 42% should feel like we should redirect non-school funding to public schools. 36.9% says we should issue bonds, and 12% says we should increase taxes. Okay. Now, this one is a little different in that it's support for new and replacement schools and the acceptable method of funding. So Again, kind of staggered, but there's a lot of support. Strong support's 32%, moderate's 27%, and somewhat support's 26%. Add all those together, you're at 87 in total support. Then at the funding sources, you are at 42% believe you should issue bonds, 25% redirect current funding, and then you have 20% that says they do not support the increase. Okay. All right. So that's the end of the survey results. I'll take questions or comments on the survey before we move on to the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly. Board members, we just ask questions or make comments, and we'll start with Mr. Walter.
Well, I'd certainly like to thank the 1,924 people that took the time to give us some feedback. That's certainly appreciated. What were some surprises that you saw? Anything in here that was surprising?
I don't know that there were surprises. I think there were a lot of things that we believed in having the documentation to come back and agree with what we felt
Sure.
and believed was good. I guess the difference in opinion from redirecting funding versus bond versus raising taxes, I think that's what makes it difficult for us to get funding, is because there's such a variety of opinion out there. When we just need the funding, we don't really, doesn't matter to us where it comes from.
Sure. I thought it was interesting that we're able to break it out by income. It'd be also very interesting to be able to break it out, because let's see, like 6 in 10 of our respondents were teachers, so you would expect them to be fairly engaged and want some increases. So I'd like to see if there was a big difference between the non-employee or teacher and the general public. So if you could get that to us at some time, that'd be interesting to see. Thanks. That's all I had. Thank you, Kelly, and everybody who put that together. That was
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walter. So you clear on what it was he was after?
Yeah, we're going to write that down and we're going to get it to
Okay,
him.
fantastic. Ms. Carpenter?
I need somebody else's mic. Not doing good. Buzz tonight. Yeah, that didn't sound right at all. Well, that's the one that's buzzing. Explain to myself and our audience, what is a redirect current non-school funding to public schools? What kind of money is that? Where does it come from? What are you referring to when you're saying that?
So, and I didn't.
You're saying redirect current non-school funding to public schools. What is that money? Where is it coming from? What is it?
So we get our dollars from state, local, federal. 68% from state, 24% from local, whatever those numbers were that I just told you. So if you take state, for example, so think about our tax revenue, and part of the money goes to schools, and part of the money goes to highways, and part of the money goes to, police and fire and all those protections and all of those things. And so if it doesn't go to schools, what we're saying is redirect it. So if our part of the pot is, and I know closer for the local, if our part of the pot's 40% or 45%, then what we're saying is give schools 45 or 50% of the pot and redirect those other funds that are currently being spent on something else into schools. So determine your priorities, and if education is important, then redirect those funds. And that's what our citizens or our respondents are saying, is that it maybe not raise taxes, maybe not issue a bond, but redirect our spending.
In other words, in other essence, you're saying, instead of maybe giving that now, and I'm just re-quoting, I'm trying to explain this to the public, what this is basically saying. Instead of where it would be basically maybe going to the libraries, to the sheriff's department, to the Parks and Rec, or to some other entity of that nature, then it would be going to the schools. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's the statement. Redirect it to non-school, from non-school to school, yes.
But that is what kind of money you're talking about in that sense?
Those examples that you gave were local examples. So if you're talking about local funding, that's what we're talking about. If you're talking about state funding.
But it could be state, federal, or local. You're referring to that. I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear in that type of statement. So it could be from either three of those sources then, that type of funding then? It could be. Okay. And then two, the very last slide, that one is very eye-opening. I think when it says, I do not support the increased funding in this area, 42.7%.
No. It's 20.5. 42 is issue bond.
Oh, is that the dark?
Yeah.
Well, the dark one, the blue, issue bonds, 42.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That's what was, okay. Because the 42, that's what, the dark blue did not answer. Okay, so issues bonds are what they're saying. So the 20 is the redirect. Okay, because that one was the kind of, I do not support was the light blue. That was the 20 point. So the 42 is issue bonds. So basically they're saying issue bonds for the amount on that one then.
42.7% of the people who took the survey said issue bonds.
Issue bonds is what they're wanting on that. Is their indication for, so that's how they want to basically to get the new schools
New
in,
replacement schools.
is basically what they're saying on that one. Okay, that was my two questions, because I wanted to make sure I was clear on where they're saying they want to get, where this money's going to have to come from, because what I was seeing, I want to make sure I understood, it didn't look like anybody wanted to raise the taxes. Is that correct? Is that a pretty clear assumption? I didn't see any of it where it looked like taxes wanted to be raised.
Seemed like it was 10 to 12% throughout.
I mean,
From what
that's
I
what it
gathered.
looked like to me.
It was a lower percent, but there were people that were willing to raise the tax to promote education.
Very low, though. Very low. I mean, to me, that looked very... Yeah, again, I'd like to see that on the income level. Can you get that on the income level?
I think we can. We'll see.
Oh,
I think we
okay.
can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter, and I'm going to go ahead. She hit on one of my comments, so I'm going to go ahead on it. It's, the follow-up question really to, are you willing to redirect? Oh, yeah, well, the follow-up obviously is, what are you willing to give up? And that's where the rubber meets the road, because then you have to pick the library or the this, that, or the other. So, I mean, it's a general question, and it's interesting to know that that's kind of people, hey, if you can, we would support it, but it's easy until you have something that you're going to lose. But anyway, thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker, do you have any questions or comments?
Just one question. How did this study or this survey rate as compared to last year's survey? How many people, do you know how many people took it last year? Because, I mean, we just started this like the last couple, 3 years, wasn't it?
We did not do the survey last year, but there was a year that we did the survey, the first year of the budget committee that you're referring to. And I can get those numbers for you and do a comparison, but I didn't.
What was the method of informing the parents to fill this survey out? How did we publicize it so that they knew that they needed to?
I'll let our public relations person help me answer that question.
I saw it on Facebook.
Good.
Isn't everything on Facebook now?
We used our district website and also our social media sites to promote the survey and participation. The because of the nature of social media, we kept posting reminders that sort of did a countdown from the last day of the survey, counting backwards, 5 days out, 4 days out, 3 days out, 2 days out, the last day, to try to make sure that people were seeing it again. It wasn't getting buried in their news feed or anything like that.
Do we happen to know, or was there a marker in the survey to kind of give you an idea of what school it may be coming from, or which schools may have been most heavily participating in it, so that you kind of get an idea of which part of the county is actually?
I don't think that was a question. You didn't ask them to identify.
I mean, that would be a marker you could put at the beginning. Which school does your child go to, or something like that?
Originally, there was a question in about zip code, and we didn't, our areas aren't as clearly defined to tell us which school they're in, so we did take that question out.
Okay.
So I did not gather that.
All right. Well, great work. I appreciate the results that we got. At least it gives us an idea of the pulse of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. And there may be something, people want, when they do these, they want some level of anonymity, So I can
always put the.
I can understand not wanting to put the zip code. I mean, it's good data for us to know, but, whether they would skew people from not participating, I guess, it's kind of 6 one, half a dozen of another. But it would be interesting to know how many people participated the last time we do it.
Yeah.
Social media has exploded since then, and so that if we decide, well, let's do it again next year, we've got a year under our belt and promoting it via that route to see if we can drive the numbers up, because obviously the more people we get involved, the better off we're going to be. Mr. Shue, do you have any comments?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just have a couple of comments. I think that this is another example of where that Cabarrus County Schools reaches out to not only the teachers, employees, but to the public in general to get input on how we spend the tax money, where it goes, and it's nice to see that there's a diverse group of questions here, and it covers a lot of areas. And I just thank everyone that participated, the budget committee, and everyone that had the gumption to say, hey, let's take another survey and let's see where the people are on these issues, and compile it in a report. And so we have it here, and it speaks for itself. And so I thank you so much for all that you do, and all those that participated in the survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. Mr. Harrison?
I just wanted to say that I've had a couple of root canals, and this survey was not one of them. This survey was very easy. It was well designed. It was user-friendly is the normal word, and it was very accessible to just about anybody who could have accessed it through those sources. I kind of would have preferred to see some geographic information, but I know you had reasons for taking that out, and I know what you mean about zip codes. That wouldn't have been very accurate kind of thing with how our zip codes can be, pretty huge swaths of the county. And I was going to ask if this had been done before. I didn't remember it last year, but I'm glad to see we're using it again and revamping it for the current environment. Also, I do want to agree with Ms. Carpenter and Mr. Shoemaker that redirecting other funds, I know what you were trying to get at was kind of a philosophical question, and Mr. Kiger's also point was that what does that mean? Mm-hmm. But I know what you were trying to do with that question. But if there's any way to get down into a more granular type of question in the future, maybe we can get people to actually voice how they would choose and make hard choices as opposed to the way it's worded at the moment. And I almost wish we had asked, are you going to vote this year? But that's another matter. We won't go there. But thank you very much for the data.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Dr. Phillips, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, one comment is that we shouldn't be surprised that 99+% of the people that took the survey had internet access, since it was an internet-based survey. I would have been suspicious if it had been otherwise. So anyway, I think we need to take
we did paper copies too.
Yeah, but how many paper copies did we really get done? So I would just say let's take that technology piece with a grain of salt because it is skewed by that. but since everybody else has been giving you homework, I'm going to have a request, because you were going through that, it was like, especially when it was on the ones about awareness, were you aware of this, were you aware of that? I'd like to see it broken out between school employees and non-school employees, because I have a feeling that the school employees were pretty aware of what teachers spend and such like that, whereas the public might have been differently.
All right, thank you, Dr. Phillips. And I already made, I guess, one comment, and then the other one that brought up was the willingness to pay extra tax. And there, there are people that said, hey, and I guess I didn't look at the wording and whether it says they're talking about their own or they're willing for somebody else. I would imagine the number's higher if you're talking about somebody else. But, it is a good barometer of what people want to do and want to support. So I'm glad we have it. And the one thing I thought was pretty impressive about the people that participated is you asked about the health and retirement increase, and you actually put a specific number on it. And I've been sitting here 3 years, and I wouldn't have told you that the number was, I didn't have a reference point, but they strongly said they were aware that that was the number of what the increase was, because we all know it's gone up, but that's a pretty staggering amount. I think it was 28 million, is that what you said?
28 million in total, yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I'll share this quickly with the other board members. At our last chair-vice chair meeting, we had a specific conversation on just what the Affordable Care Act was going to cost our district. And so that they were well aware that's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And here's the number. And it was a pretty big number. It was about $500,000, I believe.
Yeah, it's in our budget document.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the document since it's come up, but I just wanted to make aware that those are kind of things that we have to talk about, we have to be prepared for, because our hands are tied on a lot of things. So, okay. With that said, I believe Jason had a comment that he wanted to make as well.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the technology questions, because we're going to talk about digital content later today. One of the challenges that we're going to experience in the coming years is making sure kids have access to these devices. So this was our first attempt to reach out to the community and kind of see what their thoughts are, whether they have devices at home. To Dr. Phillips' point, obviously, people who took the survey probably do, but we'll continue to reach out to our community as we make those decisions going forward.
Okay, fantastic. Now, are you moving on to the superintendent's budget recommendation? Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. So on March 20, we did a budget work session, and we reviewed the entire document. And since then, I took your comments and questions and concerns, and I have edited this document to include any questions or concerns or changes that you wanted in the document. So I will start reviewing the document, point out some of the changes that you have asked me to do. At the end of the day on our next session, we'll need for you to adopt a proposed budget so that we can present it to the county commissioners as our budget request. So anything that you have questions or comments or concerns about tonight, please feel free to stop me and we'll address those, and we'll need to get those resolved tonight so that you can adopt a proposed budget on next Monday, okay? So we're going to...
Board members, everybody clear on that on our agenda next week will be the superintendent's recommendation budget that we will formally vote on, and that will be the budget that will be presented to the commissioners.
And it will no longer be the superintendent's budget, but it will be your budget.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be
at
ours.
that
It's
point.
his recommendation. As of next Monday, it's ours. That's a very
That's
good
right.
point and a good distinction to make.
Okay. All right. Okay. The first page is a summary of our budget request for operating. On this first column, you'll see that it says amended. In the previous document, it said adopted. The reason that's been changed is since the initial budget was adopted from the county did give us the 1% pay increase for our staff, and so that's an amended budget, and that's been changed to reflect that increase there. So that document has been changed with that. I'm going to go on to the next page. These are our continuation costs. We reviewed this document on March 20th. On the first priority, I've included a note that says pay increase is based on the governor's proposal. If the recommendation changes through the state budget process, the request amount could be impacted. As you know, the governor will have a pay increase recommendation, then we'll have several different versions, and all of those versions probably will be a different amount. At the end of the day, when the budget is adopted at the state level, then that's the amount that we will request and should request from the county, because what we want to do is when the state gives us a pay increase, we would expect the local staff to have that same pay increase, and the state's not going to give us the money to pay the local staff, so we just want to match that. That's all that line item is doing. So if this rate changes from 3% because it's the governor's proposal, but the final budget is a different, that's the reason it's changing, is because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the state's going to do until their budget's adopted. Okay? And the rest of this document remained the same. We talked about, Mr. Kiger just talked about the impact to our budget because of the Affordable Care Act. It may be affordable, but it's going to cost Cabarrus County Schools $347,000, and that's due to having to provide health insurance for those employees that were not eligible before to have health insurance. So this document is $1.2 million of cost that we...
Kelly, I have a question. In reference the line item 6, the provision for the affordable care, and I've seen where I think it was one of the counties, in order to evade this, they reduced the hours of those. And I just want to make sure that the citizens of Cabarrus County know that we had that choice as well, and we chose to not do that. Is that correct?
We have, yes, we've had that discussion with our principals. When we looked at our data, we've looked at our data, combed over our data quite several times. And what we have determined is that we have approximately 1 to 2 subs that work more than the 30 hours right now. All of the other subs are somewhat sporadic in the number of hours that they work, not completely 30 hours a week. They'll work several days here and several days there, but not completely full-time. So that's where we got the number of 64. There's some other staff members in there too, part-time staff members that then would qualify, that we had to put that in there. But we believe there's 1 to 2 subs in there that would then qualify for this Affordable Care Act, that we would have to provide health insurance. So we talked to principals and we said, we can take those subs and we can require that you only allow them to work 30 hours a week. And they said, we don't have enough subs now. We don't have enough subs, and not only do we not have enough subs, is the quality of the sub that we would be able to get would be very difficult if you restrict the actual subs that we currently have now. They were very insistent that this was going to be very difficult for them and make their lives very difficult. I'm somewhat responsible for the school treasurers in our schools, and we have an ASOP. It's a substitute gathering service. It calls the substitutes automatically when the teachers are out, if the absences are in. But because we don't have enough subs now, our school treasurers have to call when there's few at the end of the day, and my treasurers are telling me they spend lots of time on the phone trying to get subs now. That's one of their biggest complaints. So if we reduce the pool and the number of subs, the number of qualified subs, we're going to spend more staff time looking for subs, and we're going to spend, my principal said, this is money that we need to spend. You know, it's a trade-off one place or the other, but this is really money that we need to spend.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that's $1.2 million of just cost that are going to increase.
Quick question on that. Do we need to prioritize these, or they're basically mandatory?
everything on this list, as far as we know it, except for maybe the new school planning cost, are things that those costs are gonna happen.
Right, so I don't think we need to really prioritize them, that's an absolute need.
Right. They're things that if we don't get the money, if the county chooses not to fund this, we're going to have to look within our budget and find dollars to do these things. So utilities are going up. Hospitalization costs are going up. And these are things that the county budgets in their budget on an annual basis, and they plan for. So there's really no reason that we should not be allowed these costs either. Okay?
Ms. Klutz, may I ask? Or
sure.
make a comment? So the budget proposal that we have before us, and I just regress a little bit to the cover page.
Okay.
Basically, in 2012-13, Cabarrus County was 111th in state funding, was 109th in the state in federal funding, and was 55th in local funding. So our overall rating in the state is 112th out of 115 districts. Is that accurate? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. All right, so we're now on page 3, continuation costs.
So we
No,
just
I'm sorry, we finished that.
We
We're on
just
4.
finished up page 3. And so the next page we'll go to is page 4, and this is our expansion request. And so these would be the items that we would ask the county for to expand our budget. The other items were things that we just want to continue to operate as we're normally operating. And these are the items that we want to expand our current operations. And you see there, the first item is the salary study. And I'm not going to go over these in detail because we've done that. But one thing that I did want to bring to your attention as I was answering some of your questions regarding the salary study is that we brought up on March 20th that our budget, our request for salary compensation was inappropriate in its timing because it didn't come in a regular budget cycle. And I went back and looked at some of our budget requests, and I can tell you that we asked for $1 million for the salary study back in 2012-13. Then we asked for nearly almost $4 million in 2013-14. And because we received no funding for either of those requests, we came back with a budget resolution in December of this current year. So I had failed to remember the previous year where we had asked for $1 million for the salary study. Okay. And we just did some tidying up with acronyms and things on this page.
I've got a comment on this page, but
Okay.
before we get there, does anybody else have it? We're not going to go down the line. If you'll just ask me to be recognized, I'll recognize you. So, Mr. Harrison, go ahead.
As I recall the discussions around the county commissioner's approval of the 1% for the remainder of the current year, had carved out individuals with salaries over $70,000. So, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
That the 1% did not apply to those individuals with those salaries. Is that
That's correct.
correct? But this request does not make that distinction. This request is all employees?
We never made a request that
Well,
carved that out.
yes, ma'am, you're correct. We never made that. But this request is all of our employees?
You're correct.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, David. Ms. Carpenter, you had a comment?
Oh, I turned me off. Now, on item number 2, is that just for growth funds, or is that possibly bringing back some additional TAs? And if so, possibly how many additional TAs could be brought back?
What we're asking is that the state gives us growth funds. And what we're saying is we need more than that. Because what we did is over the last 4 or 5 years, when the state gave us growth funds, the county didn't give us any funds, and we had to take all of those growth funds and absorb all these expenses that the county didn't fund and all these cuts that we had. And so where we did get growth funds, we had to use them for cuts. And we didn't get to hire these teachers that we should have been able to then. And what we're saying now is that we want teachers in our classroom is what we want. And to answer your question is we're going to give, if we get these dollars to hire teachers, we're going to give the schools the option. If you want to hire a teacher assistant instead of a teacher and trade that in, that's the school's option. They may do that. Okay.
Thank
So
you, Ms. Carpenter.
that can potentially lower class sizes, is that?
It would.
And that's kind of one of our priorities.
Yes. Yes, it would.
Yeah, Dr. Van Hukelum just said, yes, it would lower class sizes. He didn't know my ears were pinned to what he was saying there, but I guess the only comment I was going to make, it's at some point in time we can't do it all, and I get that, but the swim teams are some of the larger teams that we have, and I think some of them, if I'm not mistaken, they either have only one coach or then they go out and they find a volunteer who's maybe coaching, maybe one person's trying to do male and female at the same time. Well, then you're talking 50, 60 kids. And I believe, that's a lot to ask of one person when you're talking about supervision. So I don't know, maybe it's not worth adding a line item there or adding something to it. It's just a comment I wanted to make that the swim teams are, it might be worth taking a look at what it would take to have one more assistant listed there for the assistant coaches. So, okay, with that being said, Mr. Shoemaker, you have a comment?
I just have a couple comments. On the core instructional materials, one of the things that we have been faced with is a $9.8 million cut to instructional materials by the state over the last 6 years. So that means we haven't been able to invest in textbooks for our children, and that has severely hampered our parents in helping their children at home when they bring work home, because they're having to work off worksheets or go to digital media or something that they may not even have access to. So we're asking for some money to help us in that regard, and that's where that $1 million is, to try to help the parents at home stay with their kids as they work through homework. Another thing is the average teacher pay in North Carolina. Cabarrus County is 99th in average teacher pay in this state. Now, you can talk about why that is, and part of the reason is the fact that we have very young teachers here, and so that further drives our average down a little bit. But at the same time, we have good teachers, but they're not paid where they should be paid. And our salary survey and our salary study proved that out and fortified not only that the teachers, but that our clerical folks, our maintenance technicians, our transportation maintenance technicians, our custodians, and you just name the groups, and they're all underpaid. And we just this year got them to the minimum, and we raised that. This board took money out of its fund balance to raise them up to the minimum, and that will be recurring dollars that we'll have to spend out of our fund from here on out, that we'll have to spend to keep them at minimum. But our county needs to step up and needs to make these people whole. The taxpayers are getting an unbelievable value when you look at the results that we've had this year and as a result of last year. It's showing what our teachers are doing, and this is something that we have an obligation as a community to do something about and to make our voices heard in this regard. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Okay, we're ready to move on to page 5.
Okay. So this document is a summary of our charter school obligation. And what I want to point out here again is just a reminder is that regardless if these children come to public school or public charter school, Cabarrus County has an obligation to fund them. And the obligation comes right through my checkbook. So I have to have the money. And if I don't have the money, then I have to go cut it somewhere else. And that's just it in a nutshell. I'm requesting the money because I have to send it out. These children are in Cabarrus County. You have an obligation to fund these children, whether they come to public school or public charter school. Okay. All right.
Comment?
All right, any questions or comments on that?
I have a comment.
Dr. Phillips?
Okay.
I was just going to comment, I think we've got a budget amendment coming up later on that's directly related to you having to cut money out of our instructional budget because we didn't get enough from the county last year to pay for this line item.
Exactly right.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Shoemaker?
The charter schools take us down in population, but in a very different way than you would think. You'd think that if you lost 1,000 children out of our school system, that would really show a huge loss of children. The fact is, we get a little bit of children, a few children out of each school, they come out. So it's like a great big beehive, and you take individual cells out of the beehive. It's still one big beehive. We still have to do the maintenance on the beehive. We still have to move the bees around. We have all of the costs associated with the beehive, except we've got some spaces that have been pulled out. The charter schools are basically doing that to us. And that's where we still have to run this system, and even though we have to transfer money directly to the charter schools, we still have the infrastructure that we have to maintain, and if the children from those charter schools or their parents decide to move them back into our schools, we're obligated to take them regardless of what the reasons are. And so the public needs to understand that the charter schools pull individual cells out, and we still have this great big infrastructure that we have to maintain no matter what. And they are not a driving force, except that they just take money from us, and then we still have to maintain the infrastructure with what's left over. And that's why we ask for a little bit of help with that, because they are taking out of our infrastructure.
Mr. Chairman, I
Thank
have
you,
just
Mr.
one
Shoemaker. And Mr. Shue, go
Yeah,
right ahead.
the only comment that I have is when it comes to the charter schools, even though we see that there 1,915 students are going to potentially be leaving our system or are leaving the system to go to these charter schools, the thing is that I want people to understand, and even though this many has left, we're still growing. Cabarrus County Schools is still growing. You know, we were like 30,077 the 10th day of the second month, I believe, and we're almost 30,500 now, even with the loss of the charter school students. So just think, if the charter schools were not here, where we would be as far as our overcapacities in the schools that these students came from. And that's another thing that I want the folks to understand as well, is that even though we don't get growth, it's just another example of the school system having to continually do more and more and more with continually less and less and less.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. And Mr. Harrison?
I believe at one point we had some numbers that a certain percentage of students who had gone to the charter schools decided to come back to us. Was that about 10%?
I think that, yeah, I have the exact numbers, but yeah.
So
that's,
of the numbers that consider that option, they consider it for a period of time, and then for whatever reasons, they come back into our system. Is that correct? Do we have any way of quantifying the complexity of reintegrating students and their records and their where they kind of fit into the into the daily work at a school? When in effect they don't arrive on our doorsteps in August, but September something, October something, they come back to our the home school where they otherwise would have gone. Do we have any way of quantifying that, or is it fairly seamless? The records come back to us, the child comes back to us, we have to find a seat for the child.
We have transit, somebody say the word for me, transiency regardless of charter schools.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think that's something that we deal with in some schools more than others.
For a variety of reasons,
For a variety
not
of
just
reasons, yeah.
not just charter. So that's just part of
It's part of
that
charters.
understanding. So in this particular year, we are in effect projecting that the number of students who are choosing charter schools will double, approximately, from 900 to 1,900, or call it what you want, but
And it's because of the new charter schools.
The brand new
So
ones.
we've lifted the cap, and now we have more charter schools coming in. And so that's the reason we're seeing this huge incline, this current year and next year. And until these new ones get settled in, we're going to see these inclines.
But of these 1,900 who are going to consider charter schools for a period of time, if things remain the same, 10% of that 1,900 will come back to,
Possibly.
again, for many reasons. I encourage parents and families to make their own decisions about whatever those options are and what they feel the needs are, but understand, what the charter schools can offer and cannot offer, and I hope the parents will make the best long-term decision they can for their child. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. That's the kind of the comment that I wanted to make. The 1,000 that are gone doesn't mean they're gone forever.
That's right.
And that's what's difficult on our side. There may have an increase of 900, but it's not all the same people. Some of them are going to come back, and some will leave. Well, anybody that comes back, we have to have a seat for, and we have to be prepared. And that's where it gets, that's when we're looking at your crystal ball, and it's tough to do, and it's tough to be prepared for. But it does go through your checkbook, and we've got an obligation. Exactly what you said. If they live here, they're going to get an education from somewhere, and those dollars are going to come from somewhere, and they can't just stick us with the bill. I mean, that's the bottom line. So I believe Mr. Shue had another comment.
And Mr. Chair, I've noticed that Ms. Klutz gets rather personal about her checkbook, as she states it. So she is a good steward of our resources.
I think they call that iron-fisted. Mr. Shue, I believe, had another comment.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Klutz, you may have went over this at some time in the past, but since we're on this subject again, would you clarify for the board and also for the viewing audience about how that funding works? I know we ask the county for the money, and then they send it to us sometimes, or what they deem necessary. Whatever they deem necessary, they send to us. All right. We got a student that say during the summer they enroll in a charter school.
Okay.
And then we requested funding for them, and we got the funding. The charter school then bills Cabarrus County Schools for that student, right? So far, if I get off track, tell me, because I want people to understand this clearly. So the student starts the school, the charter school bills the county school system. We fund that. And the student stays around for 3 or 4 months and decides he don't want to stay there no more. And he says, Mom, Dad, I want to go back to my old school. I liked it a lot better. I want to go back. What happens to the funding? Do they get to keep the funding, or are we prorated and get it back?
So the answer is both. So you were talking about local funding when you started your example. So I'm going to stick with local funding. For local funding, I asked that charter school to bill me monthly. And so every month I check the attendance to make sure that that child is still not attending one of my schools. And if that child is not attending my school and is attending that charter school, then I'll send them their monthly payment. If month 3 that child decides to come back to my school, the charter school hopefully doesn't bill me. But if they do, I check my attendance, I find out that that child's in my school, and I do not pay that charter school. Okay?
And that's another good example of an iron fist behind the checkbook, and I appreciate you handling that way. And I think that's probably the best way to handle it, because if you paid it out a year in advance, it would be a tremendous mess.
You never get
So
it.
you'd have to do it monthly like that, and I'm sure that you have it well under control. Thank
I
you.
get the feeling she's getting ready to tell us the state's a different
The state side's
story.
a little different, yes. So if you're state funded, so the state monitors the charter school attendance at the same way they do with us. The better of the first or the second month, ADM. So the second month, if that child's at the charter school, they're going to give them the full month, the full year funding to that charter school. Okay, that allotment for that child. If that child leaves that charter school in third month, charter school keeps the funding. Okay? Dr. Shepard makes me point out that if they leave my school too, I get to keep my funding too. It's the same rules apply. But what happens is they don't leave my school. They come into my school. So I get more coming in, so my numbers are now higher than they were at the second month.
So the 300 or so that we've gained since the second month, we don't get any additional
I didn't get
funding?
any funding for.
You have to wait till next
I
year,
have to wait till next year.
but you still have to obviously provide space for them.
Right.
But
They keep our funding. You mean they keep our funding?
The charter school does. The state level funding. Yes, the state level.
I believe Dr. Phillips has a comment. Go ahead, Jeff.
On the line of they keep our funding, I suggest an amendment to your table. Second to last, school, student first. You're showing that they'll have 2 students from Cabarrus County next year. I don't think they will anymore. So let the record show I just saved the county $3,000.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Okay, any other comments on the charter school and the dollars regarding the charter schools? Okay, we'll move on to page 6.
Okay. The next document is a summary of the facilities and operations budget increase, and I know I changed that to say increase request, but apparently I didn't get that updated, but I will. So this is our increase request for facilities and operations, and I updated the bottom of that document to address the facilities study that addresses inadequate investment in school facilities, and it suggests that there should be 1 maintenance worker per 80,000 square feet to enable prompt and efficient repairs of all specialized facility systems. And based on that, we have 5,773,652 square feet of property that we take care of. That means that we should have closer to 72 skilled labor staff. And if you look at the chart below, and that's just facilities, not the grounds. The grounds would be different. We have 43 skilled labor, and so I believe that study fully supports our request for additional staff in the facilities and maintenance department. So are there any questions about our request?
No, but I think it bears repeating that we share facilities and maintenance dollars with Kannapolis. So I'm not sure a lot of people quite understand that or know that. So, yeah, board members, any comments on this? Okay, hearing none, we'll move along to the next. Mr. Shoemaker, Scott. Go ahead, Mr. Shoemaker.
Wait a minute, let me just get back to the very first page so I can. So our overall building maintenance request, we're asking for $8,908,000 for grounds and for regular maintenance, building maintenance. Our current budget shows $7.268 million, but you and I talked about that, and you said there was a caveat to that it wasn't actually that, it was more like $6.8 million?
So it depends on what number you're looking at. So this does not include Kannapolis's share in this number that I have here.
Can you tell us where you are?
I'm back on page 2.
So
I'm
he's
sorry.
on page 2 in the summary. So we do take care of, you want me to go back to it? Okay, this number he's talking about right here, maintenance and grounds, this 5.9 million plus the 1.299 million, those are literally Cabarrus County Schools values, budget to take care of our property. And when you look at, generally when I give you a budget document, it'll include Kannapolis City's budget. So the number that you're referring to probably has Kannapolis in it, but because we're doing the budget request for our board today and not Kannapolis, we don't make a request for budget for Kannapolis. I did not include Kannapolis's numbers here in our budget request.
Well, back to my illustration. My illustration is we have $1 billion worth of facilities assets. That's just Cabarrus County. I don't know what the Kannapolis number is. They have about 1 million square feet, but we have $1 billion in our 4.7 million square feet. And if you were to break that down into a normal homeowner's expense, we would spend $726 a year to maintain their $100,000 house. And that takes care of mowing the grass, spreading the seed, taking care of repairs, everything it takes to get the house going. What we're asking for is an increase to $890 a year, to maintain that same $100,000 house. The general industry standard would say that you probably need closer to $2,000 a year to maintain your house at the right level. However, we're just asking for a small increase because we know we can't do it all at one time. The illustration is that if you can maintain a $100,000 house at $726 a year, you're not going to keep that house up for very long. It's going to deteriorate on you, and there's going to be problems that are going on. We're faced with those problems right now. Our capital budget, when we go through that, you'll see and you'll hear just how stressed we are, and we don't have enough maintenance technicians to take care of the facilities that we have right now. That's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Okay? Mr. Harrison.
Across just the pages we've covered so far and subsequent pages that we'll talk about, you seem to be saying that we have needs for personnel which, if we could hire them, would lower the unemployment rate of Cabarrus County? My, is that the case? That we are potentially we are a huge employer of the county, and we could make a great impact upon the economic atmosphere of the county if we could hire the right staff, the right skills, the right people to fill these real and not fluff needs. These are needs that we'd put these people right to work, doing the jobs that they do well, technical jobs as well as maintenance jobs, as well as teacher jobs and assistant jobs, and all across the board, if we could get the funding.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment too.
Okay.
In reference to going back to the page where we were talking on the summary.
Okay.
With the 5.7 million square footage and 80,000 per employee, and we have 43 skilled laborers, and that statistic says we should have 72. Well, that's 29 personnel short on our skilled labor force for Cabarrus County Schools. And so the reason that I wanted to bring that to light is because people are asking me, and there was even a quote somewhere, might have even been on Facebook or somewhere, that said, well, Lynn, can you tell me how that Cabarrus County Schools got $180 million behind in maintenance issues and that kind of thing? Well, obviously, number one is funding. And number two, if you had all the money, if you had the $180 million, guess what? You got to have personnel. And personnel costs money as well. So you can see we're running about, 55, maybe 60% of staff where we need to be. And then, of course, the funding didn't follow that. So that's how we got to be $180 million plus behind in deferred maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. I'll just make a quick comment that I know since I've been here and doing, I've been on the construction subcommittee, and construction turned into maintenance. And we have talked, for the 3 years I've been here, we've talked about how, that we're short-staffed. And I think we've tried to address it when we can and when we had funds to do it. I think we've recently gotten an HVAC tech, I believe, and another project manager or whatnot. But it's when you're behind, it's just tough to catch up and get in front of it. But so we've done, and Mr. Whitkey's done the best he can with what he's got and the guys that he has, and trying to push them out and get them out into the field, and all the while dealing with, oh, by the way, you're not allowed to take your cars home anymore. So, we did reverse course on that. It was the right call at the time, but, it didn't really work out the way we wanted. So, there's just a lot of hurdles there. And when you're short-staffed, you feel that every single day. If you don't have a textbook, well, you don't feel it except on the day you really need to use that textbook. But Mr. Whitkey feels it every single day, because his guys aren't going somewhere, and there's a work order that did not get filled that particular day. So anyway, okay, go ahead, Ms. Carpenter, you have a comment?
Question again. On the 7 high school athletic field maintenance, what was that again for? I can't remember that one. What was that going to be for?
That's the care of the field. The field's taking care of the field so that they can be used. And we have justification documents. You see that highlighted form there, and I can pull that justification document up for you.
I couldn't remember that
if you
one.
want me to?
Yeah, if you would.
It's
Yeah, because that one I do have a question on.
That's where, we currently give them $5,000 per school, and that's it. And then the rest of everything they pay for is out of either boosters or gate. So this is an increase to take care of the fields that we build and give them and that they use, and not only the athletics use it, band uses it, student council uses it during halftime of the homecoming, cheerleaders use, whatever. So, I mean, it says athletic, which I guess it is, but it's really a little bigger than that. But that's, unless I'm
that's
off
right.
track, but
Care of the
historically up till now, they've only been given $5,000.
It is true maintenance. It's just maintenance of the fields, and we've just not had enough money. We don't have enough money to maintain our fields, to maintain our property, and this would just be allocated specifically for that. I'll get you that. The justification document is in board
Okay,
docs right
I
here.
remember seeing some of this.
I think Dr. Phillips has a comment.
Well, I was just going to bring us back to the, one of the arguments for the turf field project at Central Cabarrus was that they spend,
Yes.
I think they said $43,000 a year just on lawn care of the football field.
Correct.
And putting lime down for the lines and yardage and all that. So when you take that 73,500 divided by 7 high schools, that doesn't come close to the 43. So, and that's just for one field. That's not for all the other fields that we have.
Yeah, and I think, and Donna may want to comment on this, but I think if you talk to the ADs, what they would tell you is, if they're having to take all of their efforts for boosters and gate to put it in maintenance, they then can't do the other things that they would really like to do, which is buy a new mower, where they could be proactive on some things. If they see a bleacher that's torn up, like we've seen before, they can fix it, But when they're using that money as necessity, all of it becomes, it's not extra. Booster money should be extra because they're working for it and they're going out to raise it and people are getting involved, and we're actually having them use it as operations, and that's really that's what's a little out of whack. And I think Donna is going to comment on that.
And I think related to this, there was a misunderstanding that the $5,000 was going a long way. But the key was, while it's appreciated, the $5,000 really only pays for the painting of a field and none of the upkeep that's been talked about tonight. And the other thing that was added to that, we've experienced a drop in gate receipts this year, and that in itself has become rather costly, and again, trying to maintain fields there for use all year round.
And I'm sorry, this is fresh on my mind. I did talk to somebody that they played a women's soccer game and was against it was a conference game, so it was one of the out-of-county conferences. 0 people, not even a parent from the other team came to the game. So the gate was, I mean, they didn't make anything on the gate. It cost them to put the event on. And when Mount Pleasant used to play Central, well, you're not very far away, and people are coming, whether it's home or away, and we lost that, and it was no fault of ours. I mean, that's the Athletic Association in Raleigh, and we knew it was coming, and we tried and scraped and fought, and it just didn't work out. But that's a big hit, too. They're not getting gate like they did in the 3 years that we had the Cabarrus County Athletic Conference.
And then the gate has to go to pay the security as well as the officials, so you still got the constant cost. And again, this is just athletics, not the other use of the fields.
Okay, any other comments? Carolyn, you're keyed up. Nope. David, you have a comment?
Just very quickly, a few months ago, we had a discussion of a rate sheet for use of school facilities. I don't specifically remember, but is there a calculation for an appropriate fee to charge outside groups using fields? It's on that rate sheet, as I recall. Have we begun implementing that rate sheet and/or bringing in revenue to some extent yet?
Even before we implemented the new rate sheet, there was an old rate sheet.
Right.
So we were always bringing in revenue. It's just we've restructured the rates.
And when that happens, is that kind of money earmarked for that field, or is it just put into the kind of general fund and allows you to help with expenses, or is it directed back to that particular facility?
So there's two avenues that those dollars come into. One is the dollars for the electricity and the custodial use and those kinds of things. Those come back into my account so that I can pay for those expenses. And then there's another fee that we'll send back to the school, and we'll allow the school to use it for field maintenance or whatever the school wants to do. And so once that gets into the school's account, the school can determine whether that goes to, if athletics generated it, then it can go to athletics, or if it came from the auditorium or a classroom, they can determine how those funds would be used. But they have some flexibility with that. Okay. So our next budget request was technology. We didn't have any changes on that document. So I'll move on. And the next one was the one we were going to celebrate because we're able to take care of these items within our current operational budget. So that's great news. We're not asking for dollars. We're just making you aware. And so then we'll go into, this is our summary document for our capital. And so we, based on your comments and questions, we moved some things around on the detailed documents, which made some of the numbers changed. So the request for the non-facilities did not change. It's $2.8 million. The facilities for greater than $500,000 changed a little bit because we changed from year to year. So this is a 5-year planning document that we're looking at, and if we moved it from 14-15 to 15-16, then it would change this number. So a lot of we may have moved it from year to year based on your comments. And then the less than 500,000 is now, as you can see, $20,998,000. There was a note at the bottom of this document added. The $17,500,000 in Note 1 and the $15,500,000 in Note 2 were all included in the $129 million in the above request. Therefore, the net request to the county would be a $96 million request. So just making them aware that we did have those two items in that request. So we're not asking for much. We understand. So the next document is the non-facilities capital outlay request, and that document didn't change. $2.8 million. The next document is the greater than 500,000 list. Again, I'll call your attention to the top. The request for fiscal year 2014-15, and then we go across into the 5 years, and then we have the total to the far right. At the bottom, we have the total by year, so 2014-15 is $129,965,948. Again, we take off those dollars that were already funded by the county. And then we get into the detail of the document. I have made changes based on your comments and questions, and I think they're reflected there.
Yep. Ms. Carpenter, you've got a comment?
Yes, could you run back up
Yep.
to
Which page?
the 2.8 page?
Okay.
And I'm sorry I didn't get my question to you. Just,
Can you clarify what page we're looking at?
we're looking at it doesn't have a page number.
The requested items,
Well, it was page,
non-facilities capital outlay budget.
yeah, it's the,
Page 10.
is she still on that page?
Yep, here it is.
Well, I was looking at the item number 8 and 9.
Okay.
I really think those need to be flip-flopped. Because and I'll give you my reasoning for that. The 9 being the floor lift system for buses, for repairs that occur under the bus. To me, that seems like a safety safety item. We're doing something, we're lifting a bus up, so we can see under it. to me, that would be a safety item. To me, that should go before band instruments for the middle and high school. I mean, this is a safety feature so we can repair the buses, and something that we need to do because we know we have buses that need to be repaired. This is a $52,555 item. To me, that should go before we're looking at a $200,000 item, and to me, that is a necessity.
Okay.
And to me, getting band instruments, to me, that's something, it'll be nice to have, but it's not something that would be a safety issue and something that is a dire necessity that we would need for our buses.
Is that the only concern on the page, or is there any other concerns, or is that the only one?
That's the only one I see on
Okay.
that page there.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I tell you, what we would probably want to do, I mean, the board, as you guys know, if we want to change something, we can do that. The question I would ask is, make sure we understand what the Trago process was that prioritize these and put these in whatever order they got, and make sure, if we're reading that as some sort of safety, but if, Dan Meehan doesn't, oh, no, that's not safety, that's X or whatever, well, that would be information that would be pertinent to us. So, I mean, I guess if you want to give us a little background on how we got where we are with that particular line item.
Mr. Chair, I can attest to the need for those.
Okay.
I went and after, in fact, for the floor lift, for the floor lift systems, I went and talked to the maintenance, the transportation technicians that day after our meeting to find out how they were using it, looked at how they were using it and what they're doing with it and the productivity that's involved with it. And currently, on most buses, they use what they call a creeper, and they have to roll on their back, and they have to do all of their work from their back looking up into the bus, so everything is done here lifting up. So a lot of times they have heavy, these bus transmissions and a lot of bus components that are underneath are very heavy, and they don't have the leverage that they need, and they have to put special devices to help them work it. With the lift system, they can literally drop the truck or the vehicle down to a level that they can literally stick their head in there and get a three-dimensional viewpoint of the system that they're working on, rather than a two-dimensional viewpoint laying flat on their back looking up at it. So they're able to do more and get a lot more activity with the bus. It also allows them to do their work more efficiently and to put different types of devices in there that will support the components that they're dropping out. They can roll under different types of lifts and components that they do have in the shop. It would expedite their bus maintenance dramatically, and it's just amazing we don't have it for all the bays. I think it's well worth its weight. I don't know what the return would be on the investment of it, but I can tell you these things would do a lot for these folks, and especially when you look at the number of buses that they're having to maintain right now and get out the door. And the pressure will be on next year. If we don't get any additional buses added to our fleet, then these guys are going to have to turn these things around much quicker, and they're going to need this type of device to help them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
One of the things down here, it said too, could possibly, decrease the worker compensation claims. I like that. We wouldn't have. So that's one of the other things.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, you have a comment?
I'm certainly no business person. I don't mean to talk as if I am, but if on page 8, we've in effect said that the transportation division saved us $635,000, it stands to reason in my little brain that the items that are on page 10 related to the transportation portion of our total budget altogether could become what I've heard called a profit center of the school system. I don't mean profit in the normal business sense, but we're saying, and have, I think, many times, that our transportation system is very efficiently run, is saving us money, is working extremely well, and Dan Meehan is to credit, and many other staff people and his employees in that whole unit are hardworking. If we could consider any of these transportation items on page 10 as higher priority than what they are, what I'm saying is that the savings we would recoup from that. Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. In terms of the prioritization of the funding we need for those transportation items, we would be, in effect, putting the money in a very efficient cost savings activities that the Transportation Department is currently showing perfectly well that they're extremely capable and able to perform. Does that make sense?
I agree with what you're saying. If you look at this list, you'll see that most of the requests on here are transportation. So we're putting a lot of money back into our transportation. I agree that transportation is doing a phenomenal job, proud of them, think they're doing excellent, but we're investing a lot of money back into transportation. But I do agree with what you're saying.
Okay, I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get some sort of consensus, but I'm going to go back. I do want to at least ask, this fell here for a reason.
Yes.
So, do we know kind of how or why? Is there something? The only thing I want to be cautious about is just saying, oh, that sounds like a good idea, and just doing it without at least exploring a little bit of how we got the list in front of us.
In our budget process, we listened to each presenter, cabinet member, director, whomever presented and we listened to the justifications for all of the requests, and then we went through a process where we evaluated the request, and so those were determined the value for those requests, and then they were the priority was determined based on the way that those were voted on or evaluated. So certainly you as a board get the final decision making, but there were nearly 25, 30 people in that room that helped make the decision to prioritize them this way, based on sitting through many hours of listening to justifications for their budget request.
Okay. Is everybody kind of at least somewhat clear on that? So, Ms. Carpenter, I guess, are you formally requesting that do you want to get a general consensus from?
Go ahead, Dan, with that.
Well, we're going to decide whether we move forward.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just for whatever it's worth on this, I have a lot of confidence in our budget committee, since I have served on the committee several times, and I know the efficient method that we use, Trago, and although the $52,000 we're talking about could possibly be looked at as a safety issue, but then again, look at it, I don't think we've had lifts for a very long time. I doubt we've had them ever, and obviously, when you lift in a 200 or 300 pound transmission, there might be some workman's compensation claims related to that for whatever reason. I can't imagine. In my younger years, when I was working on transmissions and all that stuff, 16, 17 years old, it's no problem. But, when you've got bus transmissions, I'm just talking realistic, bus transmissions and the rear ends of these buses are heavy. And this would definitely make their life a lot easier, and it would affect the staff at the transportation garage over there, however many it is. It would have an effect, no doubt. But the band instruments would have a greater reach in our school system, because you'd have literally hundreds of band students. And, I don't have a problem moving it from where it's at now, switching it around. I don't have a problem doing that. But I would like to see the board, though, consider the thought process behind where it's at. And, for us to continue to have the confidence that we have had in the past on the Trago process and the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. Okay, board members, any last kind of comment? We're not going to, we don't really necessarily need a motion. We just need to have a discussion. If we want to tell her to move it, we can tell her. If there's enough of us that say, leave it alone, then we'll just leave it alone. So I'm kind of in the same boat with Mr. Shue. I just hate to trample on the 25 people that through hours or whatever, and that's kind of how it it fell out. So, I mean, the picture's, worth 1,000 words. Once you see what they're talking about doing, I understand why it would be invaluable for them to have and to be able to do what they're going to do. So, and the band instruments poses some questions of, what type, how many. I mean, it's just a number and a description, so I guess I'm showing that I didn't read the backup for that particular item, so.
We have a justification document.
Yeah, I know you do, and I have not read it. At least, I did not read that one, so it's easy to see that I didn't read that one. So, okay, Carolyn, you want to move it? You want to stick with your guns?
I am, but we are the board that are elected to do this. And that is what our final say is. And I was serving on that board. And I was elected to be on that board. And we are elected to serve the people of this. And we have the final say on this. And that's what this, and the budget committee is elected by us. And that's what it is. And we are the final board, and that's what the committee was set up to do, is to help us. And that's what, when the committee was set up, it is a committee that is set up to help us. And that's what the whole thing is for them to bring their recommendations to us. And that's what it is a recommendation to our board. And we are taking those recommendations. And that's what we're basically doing, is taking those recommendations. And when we get the final results of that, that is what our job is to look at those recommendations. And if we have suggestions, we have the choice to make those adjustments.
You are correct. And if four of us want to make the correction, we'll make it. So, but you're exactly right. So, all right, board members, what's the pleasure on moving you want to move the item? I'm getting a yay. I'm getting a yay. Yay. Okay. We'll bump it up. We'll just flip-flop number 8 and 9.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Carpenter, for bringing that up, and we'll move along to page 11.
Okay, we're back to our greater than $500,000 capital projects list. Again, we made some adjustments based on your comments and questions, and I'll take any additional questions or concerns you might have on this document. Again, we're in year. We've got items that we believe that we feel that we need in 2014-15, and then anything that can wait a year into the next 5 years. And we don't have our needs beyond 5 years on this document, although we already know we have needs beyond that. I would call your attention to the roofing needs that we have identified in 2014-15. We have $9.9 million worth of roofing needs in the greater than $500,000 list, and I'm having a hard time finding dollars available in the county's budget plan to fund that for us.
Okay, board members, comments on the greater than $500,000 capital list?
Mr. Chair, my only comment, if you don't mind, is in all of these capital projects, the reality is I don't see any money available for us to get these done next year. The plans that are out before our commission right now, there is no capital available. I think we continue to float this up as a requirement for us to do business, but I think we need to understand what the impact is on us if we don't get these things, and we need to have a punt situation because they have tied up all the capital in another project. So, and they've tied up a bunch of future capital needs at the same time. So, at least $3.5 million worth of capital is spoken for that hasn't been allocated, and that's probably through their fund balance and into next year. So they've got quite a bit of capital that's already spoken for. We need to figure out what our backup position is once we offer this up to them, because I know that it looks bleak in the way they have structured their new plans.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. I think what we're going to do, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Barry just said. Tonight, there couldn't be a greater contrast between what we are talking about in this budget and what is going on at the Board of Commissioners in talking about their so-called Plan E and Plan F, which, as I understand, are based on the so-called Cash for Schools plan. If we're reading it right, it's showing that we're going to get $1 million next year for capital. All right? Now, just look at this. What we're saying for roofs alone, we need more than $9 million. Right? Telling us that we are going to get $1 million for all of this, including furniture for the schools, for new buses, because we got ones that are worn out, is an absolute insult to every parent in this county that sends a child to one of our schools. And it is also irresponsible to all the taxpayers who have put in the money to build these schools that now have leaking roofs that we cannot afford to repair.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Harrison.
And this goes hand in hand with what Dr. Phillips is saying. These needs, all on one page, are a complete picture of how we could be a true economic engine of the economic environment of Cabarrus County. We have these needs. We can get contractors and vendors in coming to do these things. We could make a vast, tremendous difference in just the unemployment rate, much less the other economic factors that go on in the life of Cabarrus County or the region, because I understand how bids have to be made to the lowest responsible bid, not just locally. But just the same, we could be very, very impactful in a positive way in the area's economy if we could get the funding to get these needs addressed, which would give students and families and neighborhoods excellent facilities to learn and to live.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Key down for us. Okay. Budget comments. I mean, I guess generally speaking, you have one you want to make,
Just
Rob?
related, if we've only got $1 million to do anything, all that's going to be shifted. And you said we have a list of plenty of projects beyond that 5-year window. I think it might be helpful just to add an extra column with out years of all the expected projects that we'll keep pushing back.
We have the facility assessment study that we've contracted to do, and that's exactly what we're doing with that. So that will be presented to you once it's complete, and we'll replace some of these capital documents. And my fear is that it will be a much larger number than what you're seeing now, but it will be beyond 5 years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. And Carolyn, you had a comment?
Well, basically, again, I'm with Mr. Phillips down there. You know, we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right off the bat, the 5 leaking roofs. I'm with him. We have to have that because that's destroying buildings that we currently own. I mean, you know, if something keeps leaking, it's destroying property that we have. That can't, if something keeps leaking, it destroys your asset. And if once you destroy it, you know, then it gets worse and worse and worse. I see Lynn's getting up there. Do we have more than 5? I'm just counting the 5 I've got.
No. Well, we have plenty of leaking roofs. I think some of the things you need to remember are in years gone by, what we were doing is what they call capping the roof. So we'd basically take a new piece of membrane, put it down over the old, and call it a day. with the new energy laws, you're no longer able to do that. You really do have to step up and bring the building's roof energy coefficient to what it needs to be. And in effect, the blessing of that is that every taxpayer realizes over time a real cost benefit from the standpoint of reduction in utility cost. So it's not, if you look at the justifications, that's in the ROI for sure. But I think what I tried to explain to the commissioners this evening or this afternoon, and I've said many times to you folks, is we have the number one roof on every one of our lists has been Northwest Middle School. That roof is in horrible condition. And we have severe leaking that occurs. I can hardly wait for the calls to start rolling in tomorrow morning because they will be suffering badly. And it's just, it has to get addressed somehow. I don't care where the money comes from. But, I mean, if I have to spend, or not me, but my replacement will spend $1 million on one project, it would have to be that project because we really don't have much of a choice. The other thought I would put out is that if there's no money to do any of the others, one of the things that we should be thinking about spending a portion of that $1 million in is planning these projects so that when money is available, those documents are ready to be used and put on the street and bid. We lose a lot of time in this process of waiting for funding and waiting for funding until we finally get something, but then there's months where we have to spend designing it. Let us plan and design the projects now so that they're, so to say, shovel ready to go whenever the funding becomes available.
Do you have to do that for a roof?
No, not so much for roofs. For a lot of other projects you do, but a roof is fairly standard. I mean, they vary with types of the construction that you'd have, but that's a fairly straightforward piece. The thing is, though, we have to get bid documents put together. These are large enough projects that requires a substantial bidding document package. So,
and that kind of falls. You opened the door right for me, because that's where my next question came. Because there was a question, and I noticed that we had our prior, the numbers of the items 1 through 6, and they were showing the Glenn Center, and, we talk about bonds and everything, and when they were talking about possibilities for bonds for issues, what we were saying we wanted to do for the Glenn Center, they said they didn't see that as a bond type thing. And that's where I would like to see us move the Culture and Web stuff up at least one level if a bond would go out there. So we had all our school stuff that would possibly, if we would get bond type things, we would have all bond capable things as 1 through 5, because they had already said they didn't see the Glenn Center as maybe bond issues. Y'all see where I'm coming from on that for priorities?
I do, but I mean, that bond discussion is
Do you think it's...
That's a whole different, there's a set schedule now of dates and times to meet for those specific projects. I mean, you'd be talking about one later on, and a new board's going to decide what their priority list is if
Are we not going to have, I mean...
With a miracle. Well, I mean, whatever the November bond is going to look like, these don't have anything to do with it.
They don't?
No,
Okay.
It's
All right,
already,
never mind.
and so I guess
Never mind.
what I'm saying is if sometime in the future, there's another
We
bond
need
question,
to-
well, a new school board at that time is going to determine the
Oh, okay.
amounts and the priorities.
Okay.
For that.
But that
So-
was one, because I saw this with
Yeah.
skill in that type of order, and I did have a concern with that, because I really feel like we do need to have the actual school with the children up on the top there, and I feel that Culture and Web does need to go up above the Glenn Center, because I did hear comments just last week talking about, especially the library, about the drainage problem and having books with mold on them. That's unacceptable. I'm with you. I'm going to pound my fist here. That is unacceptable. We cannot have facilities like that, and we got to do something about it.
Unfortunately, if you keep looking down, I mean, we're talking about roofs. But if you look at our list at how much HVAC work needs to be done, you're going to have mold all over the place if you don't get some of that taken care of. So, I mean, it's, you pick your poison. And we've got it. We got a lot of it that needs to be done. But HVAC systems are very, very complicated and very complex, and they're mechanical, and they break down, and they have a life expectancy, and we've hit the end of it on a lot of them, and it's here.
That's
$8,350,000
worth of HVAC.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, it's a lot of money. So when we're talking about, well, it's a condition inside a school that's unacceptable, there's a lot of things that lead to that, and that's one of them. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents on where we are on some of the maintenance dollars. Well, Mr. Shoemaker, do you have a comment?
I have a comment, and I regress back to the previous capital list we looked at for transportation. And if you notice, we had 12 buses on there. Now, the state mandates that we have to have 10% spares, and if we don't get these buses, we may not make the state mandate, because we already removed 7 buses out of the system and created the hub services to try to create more seats available for transporting the students, and we were still 12 buses short. There's a good possibility we won't have any buses to add. Magnify that with the roof issues, with the issues that we've got with HVAC. Oh, by the way, Mount Pleasant Middle School needs a new roof on its gym. How long do we decide to kick that can down the road? And then goes the whole question of the Mount Pleasant Middle School. When do we actually build it, and when do we have the money available for it? So this whole capital thing is all intertwined in the commissioner's use of cash money versus bond money, and the Cash for Schools plan is horribly awry, and our children will pay for it in the next couple of years, because we will not be able to remediate mold and mildew because we have so many leaky roofs. And I don't care how good a HVAC system you have, when the water's coming into the building's sinking, and you're going to have lots of mildew and mold, and we're going to hear more complaints, and the parents will come to us, and we will feel very powerless to give them a great answer.
Okay, any other comments? All right, I'm sure we'll have more, but we'll keep plowing ahead on the capital.
Okay. Yes, thank you. We'll move on to our next list, and so this list is our less than $500,000 list. So if the project itself will be less than $500,000 to complete, we have a separate list, and it is before you. The list for 5 years would be $40,389,901, but to the items on that list that we feel need to be completed this next fiscal year, in 2014-15, total $20,965,763, and they are made up of, some construction renovation type things: doors, windows, kitchen, bathroom, plumbing, lighting, electrical, mechanical, mobile units, painting, parking, playgrounds, more roofing, another $500,000 of roofing, systems, fire, surveillance, phone intercoms, ADA, structural environment, all of that totaling $20 million. And of course, when we look at our facilities assessment beyond 5 years, I expect that will be a larger number. We have the detail. We've given you hard copies because we know that this is small. Hopefully you can see that better. And I will blow this up just a little bit. If you have a computer or a tablet, maybe you can blow it up a little bit. The items that are highlighted in pink are items that if you replace a school or something, you would not do the items in pink. But if we can't get the funds to replace the school or remodel the school, then obviously you have to do one or the other. So we've noted those items.
Okay, board members, any comments on the smaller projects list? There's a lot of them here. I'm sure you've been looking at them at home. If you want to take another quick glance and look over them, we'll sit for just a second if you want.
Can I make some?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
Page 17.
Page 17.
Mr. Whitkey, could you come forward, please, sir? It's the dark school initiatives.
I know.
Yes.
We need $10,000 times about what? $80,000 to something like that number to take care of Bethel, Carlfer, Griffin, Boger, Harris Road, Patriots, Pitt School. What kind of savings would we see if we were to invest that $80,000? Would we see, what kind of payback do you expect to see out of that? Because the dark school means that the school goes dark for about 12 hours a day.
Correct.
And the only thing that runs is the HVAC just to kind of keep everything going. But all
Yes.
the lights are completely out.
As a matter of fact, we get complaints from people, excuse me, that often call and say, well, you've got the lights on in school, what's going on? And actually, it's just the exit lights. That's what it is. It just looks very bright inside when the rest of the area is dark around it. And we found that you literally, I'm trying to remember the numbers. I want to say the payback is under 3 years. It's substantial in terms of the savings that you realize.
So a 3-year payback is about an 18% ROI. Is that
Yeah,
the way I understand
thereabouts.
3-year
Yes.
paybacks?
Yes, sir.
I don't know anybody who can get 18% anywhere around here right now.
No, it's.
What about the T8s in Mount Pleasant and Concord and Harris Road? We have some replacements. Are those the remaining, the three? Are those the remaining three, or do we have more?
That's just the next group, is all that is. We're working on a number of schools now that we're funded for, and that represents the next group of schools.
Okay. And the only thing I would say is on the electrical service for Long School, you have it that it's maxed out. Is there a safety hazard with the electrical that we know of? Is it safe but just maxed out?
I think that would be the way to say it, yes. It is safe. It's old, but it is safe. We check on it regularly. But the problem is, you literally, you can't add another piece of equipment without rearranging, the deck chairs. You got to pick something to run and then, unplug something else to be able to get things going in the school. It just limits the ability of the teachers to use things they'd like to use.
But it's not critical that we replace it this year?
No, sir. No, sir, not critical. And I think a lot has to do with the long-range plan for the school itself. And again, some of these are listed simply because we're saying if you don't think about it and it gets to be 5 years down the road, you're really limiting what people can do in the building the way it's currently operating. And so we'd say, at some point, be it next year or the year after that, we really need to make a clean decision about what we want to do with the building. If we're going to stay in the building, and there's reasons to consider that for perhaps another purpose, and we think that purpose makes sense, then putting in electrical service makes really good sense. And you just plan for the future steps, but we need to have a greater view of what the big picture is at this point.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Any other comments, questions on the smaller projects? Again, there's a lot of them. Okay, hearing none.
The changes that I've noted, the capital change of the from 8 to 9 and 9 to 8. Other than that, I didn't hear the board indicate any changes.
I do have a pet project I'd like to move, but I
Really?
thought it was a little selfish, so I wasn't going to bring it up. But the ADA playground at Mary Frances Wall has been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. That's the one project that I'd like to zip right up to the top, but,
What page is it on?
oh, it's way buried in the back. Let's see. Yeah. It's shown for 14-15. It's at the very bottom of 14-15. It's on page 21. three up from the pink that's right in the middle of the Mount Pleasant Middle School pink, right in the middle. You know, that's where we've got the EC ambulatory services group is based there. They don't really have a playground to take. They've got kids that are leaving preschool, going to first grade, that they can't put them out to test and see if they know how to operate on a playground before they go to first grade, and that's a problem for them. So anyway, that's like I said, it's a pet little project that we had some grant funding to build something that, you know, people volunteered. In fact, I went out there and we got a decking built or something, but it's not a true playground that they really need to be able to do what they need to do with some of the preschoolers on the EC side. So that's where that project came from. So anyway, that's my sales pitch.
One other project I didn't catch, the PLC relocation, is that in there somewhere?
PLC relocation.
I don't think it's
Mr.
in there.
Whitke, we talked about that, didn't we?
At the moment, we're looking at a PLC relocation using, it would be operating funds, it would be a rental at this juncture, unless the board decides that they want to, actually build something physically. And so in the short term, we've been looking at either a rental or possible purchase, but we haven't been able to come up with the numbers yet. I'm
Okay, so it hasn't made a capital list. You're considering an operating fund?
Well, if it became a purchase, it would become a capital project. Lease, that's remain
Lease have to be operating.
operating, yeah. Say that again, I'm sorry.
To Mr. Kiger's point, the page 11 does not have any playground expenses in the current year. So I would be very supportive of the Mary Frances Wall playground activity if that could be bumped up. There is no money set aside for that project this year.
That's in the greater than $500,000?
I'm looking in the less than 500.
Okay, maybe I was looking at the wrong one.
I think I'm looking at the right thing.
No, it's
No, you're in
greater.
you're in the greater.
That one's greater?
Look at the
There's an
less than.
ADA section there, the $1,950,000.
But- Oh, it's parking. Got
There.
it. Where is it?
Put your
Playground.
magnifying glass on.
Yeah.
Yeah, got to
Yeah,
do that.
Put your magnifying.
Overall,
I beg your pardon, I'm wrong.
There's just over $1 million for playgrounds and sports complexes.
Yeah, it's in that number. It's in the 1,000,001. We can move it up if you want to.
I would like it. Is anybody, can I ask the board to support me in moving that? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right.
Because I
Trina
fought
would
for
love that to happen.
that handicap, that one for that child over at Colton Well, when she didn't have a
Yeah.
handicap swing. So you know I'm for the handicap swing. So
All
you
right.
get my
If we
support
can move
there.
that one up, that'd be terrific.
Okay.
I love those handicap swings. I want to have those. So
Okay.
Get that
Moving
child
on.
to swing.
Moving along, we are,
So that's all I have.
that's,
Did you have
all right.
something?
Well, if I can just bring closure to PLC, if we're looking at, excuse me, if we're looking at a building purchase, which is a possibility, that would be a capital expenditure. And at the moment, we have one building that we're looking at as a possibility. We have another that we're looking at as a possible rental. But, hopefully we can do something in the next few days to bring that to closure, at least to present something next week to you.
Okay. I think the general feeling of the board has been that we would like to take a look at the program and understanding that what they have there is special, but part of the reason it's special is because the number is limited, which means, well, maybe we need to duplicate that at a different site. And I think I've talked to enough of our board members that were interested in possibly looking at that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but maybe the direction that we'll just leave it at tonight is, if that's something on the curriculum side that you want to start looking at and moving forward for sometime later date, you can bring, back what you think maybe the best course of action is.
And there is a group that's meeting and kind of talking about the relocation, because there's also the increase in magnet students at Jay and Freed's is kind of putting a pinch on that as well. So
Okay.
there's just not a proposal yet on the table.
Well, so there's a couple different moving pieces there. Is everybody clear with that? We may have to move it, and maybe moving it means, well, we do one spot and another spot, or maybe we keep it as one, but that's for Dr. Shepard and Jason and the administration to kind of let us know. But I think, generally speaking, the direction that we've thought and talked about, especially the day at the legislative breakfast, was if there's a way to duplicate that or expand it without impacting what we do with the finite number of kids that we're allowing in the program, then let's pursue it. So, all right. So our next, you've been standing there for 2 hours. So do you would you like a break?
Am I next?
Well, I want to make sure that what I'm looking at.
No, Jason.
Well, I didn't know if you'd gone through everything that you wanted to go
I'm
through.
finished with budget. Looks
Okay.
like Jason
Well, then
is next.
then we're going to move on to 3.02, and we're going to excuse Ms. Klutz from the podium, and we're going to ask Jason to head up to talk about teacher effectiveness ranking.